Welcome to the Waiver Wire Show. This is the Fantasy Football Forge, and I'm Steve. It's not a super exciting waiver wire this week. Might be more boring than last week's waiver wire. That's possible. I will be filming this prior to the Monday night game, so if that ends up changing anything wildly, I'll just put a comment down in the comments section, and you can always do that too. Let me know and others know any of your thoughts on some players. Prior to getting to the waiver wires, though, we will just catch up on some news quickly. Right here. I think it's pretty obvious what the big news item of the day is today, and that was that Indianapolis fired Frank Reich and hired Jeff Saturday as their interim head coach. Interesting choice that they went outside to hire. Don't know what that means for the rest of the current staff. Probably that they are on watch. I mean, I guess tanking is just like a thing now in the NFL. You just have to do it a little bit, in different ways than you might do in other sports. Sometimes change can be good. So we'll see. We'll see. But I did make a comment about Ellinger that he ain't it, but the way that things are going, maybe that is what they're doing. Maybe they're tanking, so maybe Matt Ryan won't get back on the field this year. Zeke Elliott is not a guarantee to be playing this week, just based on a quote that I saw about where his health is at, going up against Green Bay this weekend. Then Elijah Mitchell's practice window has begun, so he could be returning anytime soon. I had him on the drop list last week. But with the Jeff Wilson trade, that definitely changes that scenario. So Elijah Mitchell's, at the worst case scenario, a really high-end backup that's worthy of having on your roster going forward. The Texans are hopeful that Nico Collins returns to practice. David Njoku plans to return this week, so that's nice. Evan Ingram's back injury wasn't serious. He is day-to-day. Romeo Dobbs' injury was serious. It was a high ankle injury, sprain. So that is a 4 to 6 week injury usually. Aaron Jones is expected to be fine. It was mostly precautionary measures, according to the news so far on that, and from Aaron Jones' mouth. PJ Walker is still Carolina's starter, so I speculated on that with Baker Mayfield coming in the second half last week, but they're sticking with, they're tanking too. Then Christian Watson did not suffer a second concussion this week, so that's huge news because that would have been bad back-to-back weeks for him. Tomorrow, so today for anybody watching this video, Josh Allen's UCL injury, more will be found out about. That's the ulnar, I think it is, collateral injury. I think he was out for 4 weeks once prior with this injury, so there's your worst-case scenario. Now let's look ahead to bye weeks. First of all, let's just look to now. This week, Baltimore, Cincinnati, New England, and the New York Jets all have byes. Not the worst bye week in the world. Could have been worse not too long ago, but Baltimore, wide receiver down. Cincinnati, wide receiver down. New York Jets, running back down. A little different than it looked like just a couple of weeks ago. And as far as next week, in Week 11, Jacksonville, Miami, Seattle, and Tampa Bay are all going to be on bye, so definitely some wide receivers there. I'll be short on wide receiver. I got to plan ahead for that. And that is why I present this. Look at this, see what kind of positions you might be in trouble in 2 weeks, and it never hurts to plan ahead for those kinds of situations. Now let's get on to the waivers. Like I said, not really an interesting waiver week. Mostly more shuffling around this week, if nothing else. So right up here for my quarterbacks, this is like my drop list that I've been keeping track of. And Stafford is just up on his own as just do drop him. I'm recommending to drop him. It's just not worth it. There's better stuff out there. As far as Carr, Rodgers, Brady, and Russell Wilson go, you don't have to drop him. A lot of people have picked up Justin Fields at this point, and these are going to be the only 4 that are, in this same group, essentially. And that brings us to the hold candidate that I had last week, which was Trevor Lawrence, and I just decided to keep him here again because I don't think much has changed. Wasn't the week I was hoping for this previous week, going up against Kansas City here, so if you are holding on to Trev and if he has a bad week against Kansas City, then you can kind of say, oh, okay, he's probably not worth holding on to through this bye in order to get to this Baltimore, Detroit, Tennessee. Nice little trio of games there. Then Justin Fields goes up against Detroit and Atlanta. But then it gets really rough. So his window's closing. I've been whispering his name all season long on this list, and then it turned into a louder and louder talk over the last few weeks. It ends up in this explosion of a shout, but it might be short-lived. Things will get rough. However, when you got feet like that, sometimes the matchup don't matter. Just like these last 2 weeks, those were part of a rough, or prior to this week, 2 weeks prior, New England and Dallas, I believe. Those were 2 rough matchups that I had on here as rough matchups, and got through those just fine. Now on to Jimmy G, who's got like a really nice schedule just for rest of season. Sort of like my Marcus Mariota season long there, but better. Yeah, he's a good option to get off of the waiver wires. Then Daniel Jones is a great QB to have if you're rotating quarterbacks, 2 quarterbacks, or if you like to go to the waiver wires, but you like to keep one on your roster and you're going to drop Stafford, just pick up Daniel Jones. He has some really juicy matchups that you can work around with a few tougher matchups. I think Philadelphia's in there, maybe Dallas, probably. I mean, he's with the Giants, so probably both of those teams are in there. Then Deshaun Watson has jumped up a little bit further on my list. The more I think about it, the more we just see this quarterback landscape and how it's been, the more value even just a playoff type quarterback is. And for me, I have Kyler Murray. So, it's not the sweetest matchup, the bye week for Kyler Murray, week 15, but he wouldn't be bad to have. Now let's move on to the guys who have pretty much fallen off of my, this go out and get kind of list. Running backs. Last week I started talking about, guys that you could drop and trade, and I was very confused by my own list here of why I had drop. Who would I drop on this list? And I speculated, well, it must have been, or not drop, trade. And I speculated, I must talk about Darrell Henderson, and I tried working it out in my mind live, as I talked. It didn't really come to a good reason of why I had trade. It was for Tyler Algier. It was 100% for Tyler Algier. I don't know why I forgot about that. He had trade value. He was not supposed to be a drop candidate. He was a trade candidate. Ugh. Now I know for the future. I'll just keep them separate, so that way I don't blank out while I'm recording. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. I do still think, though, you could drop those guys for better value. It obviously just depends how dire your running back situation is on your team, but there's just really no ceiling with that offense for those running backs. Then Nyheim Hines, see he's been picked up a lot. His ownership is quite high. I don't know if there's enough room for him to be fantasy viable. It's a nice offense to be on and all. I don't think he's getting any kind of number 1 RB role, which is already a questionable role. So I don't know about that. I would put him in some sort of similar value as to James Cook down here, as he's roster worthy, but I would rather have Jeff Wilson on my roster. I would rather have Gus Edwards on my roster. Don't know. I guess a lot of teams weren't able to hold on to Gus Edwards, so he is going to be available in some leagues. Keep an eye out for that. He was not ruled out until he finally got ruled out like an hour ago for this week, so people weren't able to stash a guy if they wanted to hold on to him because of this being the Monday night game, so he got dropped in a fair amount of leagues. Rashad White's obviously still a really high-end use guy. I'm done predicting the future for Rashad White until the future has happened. I have been tricked enough weeks into saying it's coming. Rashad White's gonna take over the starting role from Leonard Fournette, and then the next week he goes back to his previous usage from 2 weeks before that, and then it ticks up again. So I don't know. There has been more chatter this time around about Rashad White and getting more usage. So I do think he's at least usable. Latavius Murray, also usable. Chuba Hubbard, I don't want to. I probably have him too high. I don't want to have that, but usable. Kenyon Drake this week obviously going to be quite usable, and there is some potential future. He might be more. Heck, I should have him above Chuba, just in case Gus Edwards is out for longer than this week. He would have, he'd be the better back to own out of the two if either one of them were to own a backfield. You'd prefer Kenyon Drake. Isaiah Pacheco's still on here just because of the offense that he's on. Kieran Williams, I do believe that there is a potential role for him, but what a mess that Los Angeles, it's going to be. You can't trust it week one when he comes in there. But I do think that he could be a 3-down back for them. I know a lot of people talk about him being a 2-down back, but he can pass block, which this team really needs. There's one scout who said that he's the best pass blocker that he's seen in any draft class over the last, I don't know if he put a specific mark on it. Several seasons, though, of doing scouting. He can do everything, and I think the team seems to like him, so it seems like he caught on to the NFL game pretty quickly for them to have come out right before week 1 game saying, hey, Kyron's going to get a lot more work than you thought, and then he gets injured on the opening kickoff. I think if there's anybody who's going to come out of that backfield and be fantasy viable, it's him. Now, here's just a list of running backs that are also usable, stashable. Now let's move on to the wide receivers, and I do have a bit of a drop list here for you because there are some guys who are owned who can be dropped. So last week I just had Robert Woods up here because I was just like, hey, I'm advocating for you to drop this man. Now you see why. Romeo Doubs can be dropped. He's going to be out for a long time, and it's late in the season. Hunter Renfrow can be dropped. We've tried Hunter. We've tried to give you every chance we can, but it just hasn't happened all season. Michael Thomas can be dropped. He's on IR. Rashad Bateman just finally got put on IR. I think it was IR. Season-ending surgery to happen or has happened for Rashad, so he's out. And Elijah Moore is getting replaced by Mims. So there goes any potential upside that we thought we had for him. Now for this week, there are 2 wide receivers I have that should be on rosters. There's a flying bug that is just distracting me. I get it? So Wan'Dale Robinson and Mecole Hardman should both be on rosters. Mecole has proven to be the one true guy, although Juju's getting there too now. One more week from Juju, and we can say this about him, that can be trusted by Mahomes. And Wan'Dale just has an opportunity, especially if OBJ does not go there, to be the number 1 wide receiver on a team, which is usually valuable. Usually. Now, Michael Gallup, OBJ, Jahan Dotson, and Terrace Marshall Jr. are all going to be some pretty solid options that you can have. You don't need to break your bank for these guys, but they're not, they deserve to be on some teams over some guys who are owned, especially these guys, if you have them, and they'll be better than them. Then Christian Watson and Treylon Burks are just, the stash type guys. You're not going to be starting them until you've seen something from them, but there is the potential that if we were to see something from them, it could be pretty good and be, I guess, like a league winner down the stretch or something like that. Treylon Burks isn't in a potent, high-scoring offense, but we've seen that a wide receiver can be valuable in that offense, especially once they get a quarterback back there. Will be helpful. Then here's my list of other guys. These are basically high-end streamers, so if you want to plan ahead for streaming, obviously these aren't the ranks for this specific week, but just in general, here are the thoughts on them. I would go DPJ, DeAndre Carter, until starting wide receiver comes back there. Darius Slayton has done better than Wan'Dale for the most part in the recent history, so not a bad option there. Mac Hollins, Zay Jones, Julio Jones, Alec Pierce. I don't think Paris Campbell really did much this week, so we'll just bring that down to Alec Pierce for this week. Then Josh Reynolds, Noah Brown, and Nico Collins. I always want to call him Nicole Collins, are all, well, Nico actually floats somewhere between here and here, but I elevated him this week because they are, I think I put that in a news note at the top, right? They're expecting him back this week. And here's just guys that are waiting in the wind. Once upon a time, Justin Jefferson was on the quarterback list like this, where we were waiting for a little bit of something, and then he made his way onto my waiver wire list. So these are names that could move up, especially right up here, Jarvis Landry. If he were to have a huge game today, I would immediately put him probably right below OBJ would be my thought, but he would jump up into this group, by a little bit reactionary in that, but there's such a potential for him with Michael Thomas being out that if he could just be a consistent guy, that's possible. He's done it before. Now let's move on to the tight end waivers, and I do still have Robert Tonyan on the drop list. However, he's like 50.1% owned or something on ESPN. So it looks like, especially with this last week, next week I will not be able to keep him on the drop list. So yeah, too bad. Here are the 4 tight ends that you should be rostered for the most part. Greg Dulcich just clearly should be. He's done absolutely excellent ever since he got activated. K. Dotton had his coming out party this last week. I, once upon a time, had him pretty high on the list. He fell down on the list last week. Bringing him back up here because, once again, Tom Brady and tight ends, what's a more classic duo? Then Evan Ingram, I'm keeping up here. It was a bad week, and that will happen. He also got injured in the game. That didn't help. It was kind of late in the game, but all it takes is one drive in fantasy football. One drive can make a week, especially for tight ends. He's, for the most part, done pretty good all season, and no tight end does good every single week. And then Cole Kmet has made his way onto this list. I had him as on my Saturday video, so hopefully I helped out a few souls out there with that bold take on Cole Kmet. He sure would have paid off if anybody used him. Yeah, he's worked himself on here because that once again, that Chicago offense has just consistently been looking better and better. It's a new coaching staff. Did like those offensive hires that they brought in there. Was concerned about that for about the first 3 weeks, and then you just started to see some tweaks that they were making, and maybe it's coming to full bloom, and they're looking pretty good, and that's an offense that Cole Kmet could, if be fantasy viable in week in and week out, if that's for real. Hunter Henry is also not a bad option to have. Tyler Conklin, we're just going to leave down here. I did not expect him to have a good week this last weekend, so I'm not holding that up against him too bad. Noah Fant moved himself up a spot with his good performance, but his 2 best performances this year have both been against Arizona, so be a little bit weary on that. And then, Logan Thomas, 0 catches again, so he's at the bottom. He'll be off this list. It's a hope and a prayer there. As far as Isaiah Likely goes, he does have some extra value here. We can take that out. He has some extra value here, though, in case Mark Andrews, I almost called him Ingram, in case Mark Andrews is out for longer, I would rather take the risk that is the case over Tyler Conklin, basically how it works out, no matter how he does tonight. So, that is it for the waiver wires. Like I said, nothing too exciting. What are you spending your money on here? Greg Dulcich, you could feel free to put a bold waiver wire spend on. I don't think you'll need to go break any kind of banks for these guys. Heck, OBJ might end up garnering more interest, maybe. Depends. If there's like some big rumor tomorrow about OBJ, then his value might spike. But I don't think you need to break any banks on any of the wide receivers. Running backs, Jeff Wilson. I don't know about Gus Edwards, but Jeff Wilson will probably have 1 or 2 souls who are willing to spend up for him. So that's definitely possible. Justin Fields is probably the single most valuable option right now for the short term on the waiver wire. and probably season long. I'm still holding that. I still want to. This is what sucks. Like, I want to see it one more week from him, but I'm not gonna really. Detroit and Atlanta, he does good against, and that's what I'm expecting. So hopefully, if he does bad these next 2 weeks, well, then we're just in a whole different story. So that is it for the waiver wire. I will be bringing you, videos on my rankings on Wednesday. All 4 of the videos come out Wednesday, so check those out, please. And thank you very much. I appreciate all you new subscribers. You're the frickin' best. You're almost better than the previous subscribers. That didn't make any sense.